Got 1 minute after 6, so if we start 1 minute late, we'll need to leave at least 1 minute early, won't we, to make up for it? Looks to me like everybody went to Israel. Maybe that crowd was bigger than I realized. About 21 of them, I think, someplace between here and Israel, or they were also going to Egypt, I think, so I don't know where they went first, but a big gang of them going. You may have seen some posts. I saw David Penley saying they'd made their first flight and was on their way to Paris on their second flight. So I didn't know they was going to Paris. They may never leave Paris. You never know. They get over there. But they'll have a big time, and they're going to be gone 2 weeks, I guess. I think they get back on the 14th maybe or something close to that. So keep them in your prayers, a whole good gang of them that have taken off and gone on that trip. Some families went, some youngsters went, so that'll be a trip of a lifetime for those guys to do that and do it as a family. So, but we'll miss them, and we miss a little tonight. I see some of our choir members maybe are roaming around, so it looks like some of them might make it, and maybe some of them won't, but Tina and Carol will. Carol's always committed to her husband. She tries to show up when he's got the job to speak, so always good to have your spouse. If you don't have anybody else, you sure expect to have your spouse. Well, let me thank you for being here tonight and welcome you tonight. And we're scattered out from one corner to the other. We'll have a good time tonight. We're just going to have us a good time tonight. Looks like Debbie's passing out cards, so if anybody hasn't got a card and wants a card, just raise your hand and she'll give you someone to check on this week. Sometimes that could be a visit, or sometimes it could be a phone call, or sometimes it could be a card, whatever you can make happen and make a contact and check on someone. So, yes, ma'am.
I was going to tell those of you all who have cards that have filled them out, we've had some of the best feedback on these cards. Linda Denny was saying she visited a fella, hadn't been out of the house for a while, and she said he was thrilled to death to have a visit from somebody. And all your cards, when you've given your responses, so many pleasant things that the people appreciate so much that somebody from the church came to see them. And one lady put on there, I just wish somebody would come and see me some more. So they appreciate it so much. And I know one of these days, probably not too far in the future, I'll be on a list, and I know I will appreciate it. Somebody from the church just a phone call that says, we're thinking about you, and it just helps you remember that the church remembers you for the service you've had here, and they really appreciate it. So anytime you take one of these, just kind of put some comments on there so it gives good feedback. So I appreciate everybody that took one. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
We're going to continue this for a while.
Yeah, this works out pretty good, and good job, Debbie. Debbie's in charge of our grow team at one time and our outreach, and has been so good to do that. You got to have a leader to be a follower, don't you? So we're glad to have Debbie working that. I will say this, when we first started, we was a little confused about exactly what to do with those cards, and David told me, I told him one Sunday Debbie wasn't here and I didn't know what to do with it, so I was giving it to him, and he said, I needed that last Sunday. It was on a Wednesday night. I was late. He didn't like it. So try to get them back on a Sunday. So that's how David uses those, and Debbie, I suppose, to follow up and see what we need to do the next week. So keep that in mind. But I've started taking mine in, laying it on the secretary's desk, or finding Debbie and handing it to her, or finding David and handing it to her, or putting it on David's desk. All of those have worked for me so far. So that gives you some ideas on that. Well, let's get into our prayer request time. We want to see who we need to be praying for, and a lot of those are the same folks. If you know something about one of these and want to speak up, please do. There's some of these I won't know about, so please help me with that if you know something. Jerry Childers is the first name, and I don't know Jerry, so I don't know what's going on there, but these are our church members, our church family. Anyone know anything about Jerry? All right, we'll be praying for Jerry. You know? Say that a little louder. Okay. right. Edith said they thought he was going to have a stent put in, but he didn't have to have it, so that's good news. And then there's Edith Lovett on there. Edith's still recovering from a fall, so continue to pray for Edith. Leona Beatty is there again. Jenny Ledford. Okay, tell us about Leona. Okay, I think I heard there are 3 fractures in the left arm, but maybe not going to have surgery and healing okay. Just keep Leona in our prayers for sure. You know, something that Debbie was talking about was how the seniors that are out and aren't able to attend church now, and they're so happy to hear from their church family. Those people were the people that worked and led and made this church what it is. And so sometimes when you get to talk to them, I know Carol's been doing that some, and it's just such a joy to hear them, and they are excited because their church means so much to them, and they're glad to have that connection and get connected back again. So I just thought of Leona in that way too. Some of these on our prayer list that can't get to church right now, they really miss their church. Rosa Taylor, Mary McKnight, Carol White understands recovering from her surgery well. Karen Piles is going to have surgery on 11/17. Carol, you talked to her recently. It's all pretty much well there? Okay, she's saying yes. Ed Wesley. Jim Ed McClung had some surgery last week. Anyone, is Jim Ed home? What do you know? Coming home tomorrow. Boy, watch out if you're on the road tomorrow then, because they'll be anxious to get home. So that's good news that Jim Ed's coming home. Ada Wilson, recovering from her shoulder surgery. Continue to remember Ada and Jim. John. I better not get Jim in there. I better get a John in there. And, sorry, Ada, if you're listening. Sorry, John. John, Ada and John. Mary Jane Brown. Beth Cartwright. Frankie Coldarn, of course, Phil Robertson, Judy Fothergill, Lillian Bowles, Jamie Denny. Has Jamie had her second surgery now? She's had her second knee replacement, so keep Jamie in your prayers. She's recovering from that. Kathleen Hill, and Gary Whitus, who had a procedure about a little over a week ago, and he has seen his oncologist, and he'll be starting his therapy again this coming Monday. So I know that on him. Then we have those in the ongoing need category that you can look at. We have that large list there of family and friends. Those are all those folks that are connected to our church family one way or the other. We have the assisted living residents that we sure don't want to miss to pray for. They are some of those folks, too, that have been active in the church over the years and given so much, and now they're in assisted living situations. And then those the same way in care facility residents. Remember those. You can look over that list. Sympathy, it looks like a Tandy Withers family. Remember this family in your prayers. That's a son of Hope Withers, I understand. I've got that right, so remember that Withers family. And then those that are serving around the world. You see all of those names there, and really that list could be so big for probably everyone if you knew an individual, so we put it in one large category for our missionaries that are serving all around the world tonight. Yes? Yes. Okay, that's Yeah, that's Jimmy Cameron and the ongoing needs there. He had been diagnosed with lung cancer. Was it lung cancer? And it seems like some way that biopsies fell through the cracks and they've lost the information they need to go on and provide treatment, and so he's going to have to go back. So you can certainly understand his frustration and concern with that, and so especially pray for Jimmy. Thank you. Anyone else on there that you want to mention or have something you'd like to say about? All right. Sounds good. Yes. Okay, thank you, Dean. We'll try to make that arrangement and get her put on there. I know you've mentioned her 2 or 3 weeks at different times, so I'm going to, I can't talk and spell at the same time, but really I can't spell at all, but I sure can't do it and talk both. So I've got down to put her on prayer list, and I'll try to get that information in the office, and hopefully she'll show up in the future. But let's all remember Betty Adkins, former pastor's wife in our community, and in need of our prayer and having some health issues. Anyone else? All the team that's in Israel, pray for them for all these days, traveling over there and back. You know, I noticed that Pastor Ryan 2 or 3 times said, you know, if I make it back. Well, I'm sure he plans to make it back. But, you know, you go on a trip like that this day and time, it's a little uneasy to leave the confines of your country. So keep them in your prayers for sure. Thank you, Carol. Anyone else? What about unspoken requests tonight? You have matters of your heart, matter of people you know, people you'd like to just raise a hand and say, remember my unspoken request. Many of those went up. Thank you. Dean Stewart, why don't you stand and speak out real loud and lead us in our opening prayer tonight? Amen. Thank you, Dean. Great job. Well, I told you a few weeks ago that I thought some night I was going to share some thoughts about being a Southern Baptist. So tonight, the title of this is Blessed to be a Southern Baptist. And I'll tell you that when I start that, frankly, I've been out of the loop a little bit over recent years. And so I'm not as up to date on things as I might be. So if I make some little mistake tonight and some information to share, well, you just look over me. I'm real capable of doing that, and forgive me because you have to. But I'm going to share some information, and really when Ryan asked me a couple of weeks ago, or maybe even longer than that, if I would take these nights, and I, of course, said yes. And all of a sudden, I just had an opportunity to see a lot of information about our Southern Baptist Convention. And so some of that's what I'll be sharing tonight with you. And I say this to start out as a little testimony. I was 19 when I got saved, and I was raised in Kings Mountain, Kentucky. It's a little rural community. And I went to a little Baptist church there that most everyone in the community went to. And so I had no idea at 19 what kind of church it was, other than I just thought it was a Baptist church. You know, we had a Baptist church, a Christian church, a Methodist church, and a Church of God in our community. So as far as I knew, in my own life, they all were just the same thing. I didn't really recognize differences in denominations, didn't know much about it, didn't care much about it. And so when I got saved, well, I obviously was a member of that church. And I learned then, when I went to college, that some Baptist churches were Southern Baptist churches, and I found out that the church I grew up in was a Southern Baptist church, and so from that point on, I've known I was a Southern Baptist. Now, some people may learn that in a different way, you know, because according to some information, there's more than 64 different types of Baptist denominations. I had an uncle that was a hard shell Baptist, and I asked his two sons one time. I was going to my cousins. I wanted to see if they was all saved, and I asked them, I said, "Are you saved?" And they said, "Are you kidding me?" He said, "Dad set us on the front row and dared us to move and said we had to listen to that preacher preach, and said we had to get saved. There wasn't any other option. We just had to." So some of those Baptists are pretty hard shells. You know, there's Northern Baptist, there's Independent Baptist, there's a lot of different kinds of Baptist churches, but we are, whether you know it or not, a Southern Baptist church. Now, my question to you is, how many of you are Southern Baptist? 2, 3, 4, 5. Well, see, you wouldn't necessarily have to be a Southern Baptist to attend this church, but if you are a member of this church, by membership at least, and affiliation through membership, you are a Southern Baptist. And there are some features of Southern Baptist, but generally speaking, Baptists believe you make a personal decision to invite Jesus Christ into your heart. You cannot be saved by just being a member of an organization. So if you think you're saved because you're a member of First Baptist Church, you're wrong. You only get saved when you invite Jesus into your heart individually. It's an individual decision. And so you can't be a member of an organization and say, "Well, I'm saved because I'm this," or "I'm saved because I'm that." And there are groups like that where people really believe they're saved just because they have grown up in a certain situation and they call themselves by that name, and they think that means they're saved, when in reality they've never had a personal experience with Jesus. They've never deemed in their heart what they believe. They've never asked Jesus to come into their heart, and they've never asked Him to forgive their sins, and they're drifting along in perhaps a religious situation where they really don't realize that they are lost without Jesus. And so that's why the gospel can just go any place you want to. Well, I've asked that question, are you a Southern Baptist? In 2021, there were 47,614 Southern Baptist churches in America. I'll say that again. 47,614 Southern Baptist churches in America. And they have 13,680,493 members. And so let me tell you what that means. That means that we are the largest Christian denomination in the United States as a Southern Baptist. And so is that good or is that bad? Well, I'll leave that up to you to decide. But there must be something good about a church that has that many, a denomination that has that many members in it and that many churches in it. And so there must be something positive about it. There must be a lot of people that really do like it. We were started in 1845 in the South. I think I read as a break-off maybe from some Northern Baptists. There was a dispute going on there, and like most situations where people break off, as a group broke off and deemed themselves Southern Baptist, and they began to start what we now call the Southern Baptist denomination. So I ask you this question. If you're a Southern Baptist, this is even the bigger question, why are you a Southern Baptist? Now, that was a question I had to answer when I got to college and found out I was Southern Baptist. Didn't know it till I got there. It was Campbellsville, so it was a Southern Baptist school at that time, full of Southern Baptist doctrine. So it was pretty easy to learn what Southern Baptists believed because all the Bible classes I had were solid Southern Baptist doctrine, and so quickly understood that. But this is something I decided. I decided that maybe I was Southern Baptist because the church that I grew up in was Southern Baptist, and that I'd never really made a decision in my own mind whether I wanted to be a Methodist or in the Christian church or in the Methodist church, or maybe I even wanted to be in the Church of God. I didn't know, because to me they were all just the same as I grew up. So fortunately there in college I had the opportunity to look at what different denominations believed. And what I took was the Bible. And as I began to study and read and grow in the Bible and had the New Testament class, the Old Testament class, I was greener than a gourd, knew nothing about the Bible, very little. I knew Jesus loved me, and he loved all the children of the world, and that's about the extent of my theology and my doctrine at 19 years old. Didn't know much at all. But I began to learn, and I concluded that based on what I was reading in the Bible, to me, seemed to be the closest to what the Baptist doctrine was than any other denomination. But I'm here to tell you tonight, from my point of view, there are saved people in every denomination, because what you need to do to be saved is believe in Jesus and invite him into your heart. And so I have friends that are in the Christian church now, and they're saved. I have friends in the Methodist church, they're saved. I have friends in the Church of God, and they're all saved. You know why? Because they're just like me. They've invited Jesus into their heart, and they're saved. Now, do we differ a little on some little doctrine here or there or someplace? Yes, we do. Am I right and they're wrong, or are they right and I'm wrong? I guess we'll just have to find that out when we get to heaven, won't we? We'll have to find that out when we get to heaven. But there's one thing you can't be wrong about. You cannot be wrong about inviting Jesus into your heart to save your soul and believing that he died on a cross and rose from the dead and that he'll forgive your sins and be your Savior. You cannot be wrong in that no matter what denomination you're in. So tonight I hope to help you answer that question a little bit about why are you a Southern Baptist? And I can just tell you I may be a little excited about this because as I've grown over the years, I have become very happy to be a Southern Baptist. And the longer I was in the church, I learned more and more about Southern Baptists, and I'm telling you, Southern Baptists are a great group of people, and they have a ministry that is worldwide, and as you can see, the numbers of the churches and the numbers of the members in the Southern Baptist churches, they're big numbers, and that's got to be because we have a really good program. Well, first I want to look at a couple of scriptures real quick and then get right back into the blessed to be a Southern Baptist. This is. I'm going to tell you why I'm doing this. I'm looking at two passages of Scripture, one from Acts 1:8, you'll know what that is probably, one from Matthew 24, you'll know what that is too when I read it. But Jesus, his last words as he ascended into heaven, leaving this earth, before he will return someday, he said this to his disciples. He said, "But you shall receive power when the Holy Spirit comes upon you, and you shall be witnesses to me, witnesses to me." He said this to his disciples, and the same word comes to you and I today. This is what Jesus would say maybe if he had the podium tonight. He'd say, "The Holy Spirit has come upon you. Now, this is what you're to do. You're to be witnesses to me in Jerusalem and in Judea and in Samaria and to the end of the world." And you see how that sequence goes. It starts right where you're at, and then it goes step by step by step until it covers the entire world, is what Jesus told his disciples to do. Well, those 12 disciples or apostles, there was no chance they were going to be able to do that in their lifetime. And as you know, there were so many different scenarios along those early years trying so hard to destroy the belief that Jesus was the Son of God and that there was salvation in him. So many trying to put an end to that belief. But it has grown and spread and survived every attack that has ever been made, and it will until the end comes. That's what God promises. It will until the end comes. And so we have that concept. Think about that. Jesus said that we are to be witnesses where? To the end of the world. Well, Jesus was talking to his disciples one day, and his disciples asked him, he said, "Master, when is the end of this age going to come? Or when is the end of this world going to come?" Well, that's the question being asked all over the world today, isn't it? When's Jesus going to come back? When's this world going to end? How do we know? And that's exactly what they asked Jesus. How are we going to know when this time comes? And Jesus went on into what's called the Olivet Discourse. It was his discourse on the end of time, and he laid out many different kinds of circumstances, situations, and signs that want to precede the end of time until he got to this very one. And listen to it, Matthew 24:14. And this gospel of the kingdom will be preached in all the world as a witness to all the world. And then, you know how that finishes up? The end will come. And so if you want to know when Jesus is going to come back, this is it. This is the one sign. This is the one that's easy to understand. It's the one that tells us this, that when the gospel is taken to the entire world, Jesus said, that's when the end of this age is going to come. Well, I'm going to tell you a little more about that a little later as I come back to that thought. As Southern Baptists, we are part of something much bigger than our local church. See, a lot of churches live and breathe, and they think all the work they do is just what they do within their own confines of their church and what their membership does. But as Southern Baptists, we are members of something much bigger than just the work of our local church. We are part of a program called the Cooperative Program. Churches working together. All of these churches, I'm looking back for that number, 47,614 Southern Baptist churches standing hand in hand all over the world, working together in a cooperative way to do exactly what Jesus told those 12 apostles to do, take this gospel to the ends of the earth. And that's what we're working to do. And in this cooperative program that the Southern Baptists have, it's a program of cooperation where everyone's working together, and we are a part of that program. And so not only do we work in our local church, our local community, not only do we do what Jesus said, to go to Judea first and then begin to spread out, but we have a program within the Southern Baptists that allows us to spread out to the entire world. And it's an organized, well-designed, well-funded program that works well to send missionaries out all over the world. Sometimes, as Southern Baptists, we're called Missionary Baptists. Now, there are other churches that call themselves Missionary Baptists too, because they emphasize missions. But as Southern Baptists, we've been tagged that somewhat because everyone that knows what goes on in Southern Baptist churches know that our emphasis is to support and promote evangelism and to support missionaries to carry out that work and to spread the gospel throughout the entire world. Well, I want to look tonight at the four-part plan plus an auxiliary group that work in the Southern Baptist work, the convention. The convention is an organization. When I say convention, Southern Baptist Convention is the umbrella that covers all of these four parts of ministry that goes on from our Southern Baptist Convention. I'm going to talk little by little and try to go as fast as I can and promise you that I'm going to quit on time or early. Early is my plan. Southern Baptist Cooperative Program, it's 178 years old. Dr. Paul Chitwood just wrote an article recently about the development of the Southern Baptist, the cooperative program in the Southern Baptist Convention, 178 years old. It's a four-part plan to share Jesus with the world, plus one auxiliary group. Now, I want you to listen, because this is just the introduction, really, of these four parts. I hope to share some more about that, but I want you to listen how this is laid out. How, when this program was developed 178 years ago, the people that wrote this program, designed the program of the cooperative program, they surely had read Acts 1:8, and they surely had read Matthew 24:14, because they started out by saying we're going to have a local missions component to our organization. And so that's what we have. That's what we have all over the United States. I guess we have that all over other states too, but I know what's happening in Kentucky is that we have local Baptist associations, and we have right here in Somerset too, a local Baptist association, and that association works with our local churches. I hope to talk a little more about that as we go on. Secondly, we have a state level missions group called the Kentucky Baptist Convention. It's at our Kentucky level, and that group is going to be meeting in Bowling Green, as Pastor Ryan told us, coming up November the 14th, and at that place. They'll be electing a president. We have an executive director. We have other offices. We have a whole gang of staff that we have seen fill our pulpits at times. When Pastor Ryan was gone, he would reach out to a consultant in Eastern Kentucky or another person responsible for a program someplace in another area of the Kentucky Baptist Convention. And all of that mission work is going on in Kentucky. And recently I talked to, trying to think, Gray, I can't think of his first name, he's our executive director. He's our executive director, I think. You know that, Jim? Todd Gray. And he says now that every staff position that we have in the Kentucky Baptist Convention in Kentucky is identified as a missionary. Now, you can see how that works. Now, we've got a lot of administrative staff people. We've got clerical people. We've probably got custodial people. We've got different people that work in different aspects. But if you just look at the whole program and you say every one of those are supportive of whatever happens at this top level of program, the mission work that comes out of our Kentucky Baptist Convention, again, I hope to share a little bit of that in a bit. You can see how it's all part of the same uplifting and holding up and supporting, and so they've just deemed everybody that works in the Kentucky Baptist Convention as a mission, as part of the mission team. Now there's the National Mission Group, the Southern Baptist Convention, or it's called North American Mission Board, and the responsibility of that group is to see that mission work is done throughout the United States, and it is the fundamental organization that operates over the umbrella of everything, our Southern Baptist Convention. And it's a national, it goes by NAMB sometimes, just that NAMB, I guess is how you find that, NAMB board. And then we have, at the international level, what we know as our International Mission Board, comes out of the Southern Baptist Convention, and that board is responsible for all the foreign missionaries, 3,650 foreign missionaries. Tonight, as we sit here in our church on a Wednesday night having a prayer time, having a prayer component to our prayer list every week, praying for those people in mission work abroad, we have those missionaries that are funded by our Southern Baptist Convention. They're in all parts of the world. They're in places tonight, sometimes where they can't even tell their families where they're at. They're in dangerous situations. I had an opportunity once to go to Nigeria on a mission trip and spend some time with two folks that I knew pretty well while in Geneva Fall. Were missionaries there, career missionaries there, and they had gasoline hid all the way on a predetermined trail to the Cameroons, where if there was an uprising by the Muslims that was so harsh and so bad they had to escape, they had gasoline buried, because you just don't stop at the Shell oil station down the road and fill up with gas. They had to have a predetermined plan because the danger of where they served. Well, I was there as a temporary missionary working through the Kentucky or Southern Baptist perhaps group, and we were assigned on our mission trip and commissioned by them for this trip. And I spent a weekend in revival in a little place called Yole. We went in on a Friday night, traveled all day, went in on a Friday night. Me and another gentleman had services. I had the service in the city. He had the service in the suburbs. There wasn't hardly 100 feet between the two, really. They were pretty close. But at his service, there was a group of Muslims showed up. They harassed them all night long, and they deemed it was too dangerous for him to go back. When we came in on Saturday, it's too dangerous for him to go back on a Sunday morning, but they sent me back in. So I went back in on Sunday morning. We had our service good. When we got back to the compound where we'd spent the night, there was a group of people drove up in a SUV of some type that day, and they were part of the Secret Service group of Nigeria, of the government. And they had come to tell us to leave. And good news, we were already packed, had a sandwich in our hand, and was getting in the vehicle when they arrived, and so we did. But we could have been in trouble. I'm just saying that there are dangerous situations. That same church, 1 year later, had an uprising in it, and the pastor that I served with in a revival service on that Saturday night, Sunday morning, was killed in a Muslim uprising in that church. So you think, well, you wasn't in danger, but yes, I was. And was the other fellow in danger? Yes, he was. And you know what? Every place we traveled in Nigeria because of the conflict, we were in danger. I'm just saying tonight, that in our International Mission Board and all the missionaries that are out working tonight, they all live in a dangerous situation. But you know what? They have felt the call of God on their life, and there is nothing in all the world that they would want to do rather than be in the setting wherever they're at, sharing the gospel of Christ. And so many come back home and retire, and they continually stay in contact with, just like our John Wilson, with the people that they served in the areas where they were. They pray for them, care about them. They were their life, and those are our missionaries. I've not represented them near well enough. Not near well enough, but I tell you, they are a class of people that God has touched and chose and put in places to work to carry out this very prophecy and this sign that Jesus said, we're going to get that gospel all around the world one of these days, and then Jesus coming back. Jesus coming back. Well, there's one other group in this four-part ministry that goes on in our Southern Baptist Convention that sometimes doesn't get mentioned near enough, but it's the Women's Missionary Union, the WMU. They are women in mission, and they are an auxiliary group. They are not part of the Southern Baptist Convention, but in reality they are, but they are considered because they're women actually, I think that's the deal, they're considered an auxiliary group, and they run their own show, and they are in charge of their own mission work. And every church should have a WMU, and I know we have one here, and how many of you ladies have been in a WMU before? Women's Missionary Union. A few hands are going up. Well, there's one here, and there may be two here, might be two groups here. The WMU has been responsible for these programs. The Women's Missionary Union, the women's group. They've also, under their mission program, comes the Brotherhood, and under that comes RAs and GAs, and Acteens and Mission Friends. And some churches have changed those programs, but at one time, almost every Southern Baptist church had those programs for their teenagers and children and for their adults, and they were all studying and talking about and supporting and praying for missionaries all the time. Now, it's sad to say, but many churches have set those to the sideline, and I've been in churches where that was happening along the way. I always fought for those programs because without the missionaries out working for Christ, we won't save the world. And I'll get, if I have time, some statistics later about how many people are being saved through our missionaries that are out working. And I want to say this too. Not only do Southern Baptists have missionaries out, but all the other denominations have different types of mission programs where they're supporting and sending missionaries out as well. So I'm not in any way saying that we are the only mission team out there. Every denomination that I know of have different types of outreach programs, and some have really good mission programs as well. Well, this is what I want to ask you. If we've got local missions, we've got state missions, we've got national missions, and we've got international missions, doesn't that sound just a little bit like Acts 1:8, where Jesus said, let's start here at Judea, and then let's go on over to Jerusalem, and then let's go up a little further out, and then let's just keep on going till we get to the end of the world. And that's exactly the design of the Southern Baptist cooperative program, with its intent to send missionaries all over the world. Now, there's many things I'd like to say that I won't be able to, and there's probably a lot of things that Jim could add to what I have to say, and maybe many of you have been in some of these components, and you would have a lot to say too. But let me just say, in our local missions, I'm going to look at all four of those quickly. Our local missions, we have a director of missions. His name's Tommy Floyd. He's not our Tommy Floyd, but his name's Tommy Floyd, and he works right here in Pulaski County, and his job is to work with all the churches in our county that are members in our association, and he works with them on a regular basis. Now, we don't see him too much in our church because we have a lot of staff that are able to do all the work that needs to be done, but small churches sometimes need someone to help them, to do some training, provide materials, to encourage them. Sometimes he's the shoulder that pastors cry on when they have nobody else around to cry on, and he's a big support and help. And I'll just say for Tommy, remember him in your prayers. He lost his father this past Monday night, and keep him in your prayers. I'm just going to move kind of quickly through these because I want to finish up. The state missions, I want to point out two or three things. Kentucky Baptist Convention, we have 3 special offerings that we give in the missions. And under the local category, if you're a member of this church, some of the money that's given every Sunday goes to our local mission organization and goes to our national or our Kentucky organization, and some of that goes on to our national organization. And so if you're sitting here tonight and you've ever given any money to this church, know this. It's going in, some of it's going into the missions, and you're part of the team. You're on this cooperative program team of missionary and mission work. And so in our budget, we had $12,000 that was going to our local association here in Pulaski County. We have another $100,000 that's budgeted to go to our Kentucky Baptist Convention, and one half of that goes to the Southern Baptist Convention at the national level. And so that money is being dispersed out to support the mission work in all three of those different categories. And you're part of that team if you're giving any money to our church at all. Part of it's going there. Some churches give a percentage, and a lot of churches used to try to give 10% of whatever the general fund offerings were. They wanted to tithe on it back to the cooperative program giving and give that. And in addition to that, we have 3 special offerings that are given each year, one for state missions, one for national missions, and one for international missions. And one of those is for the state mission. We just did ours, was our Eliza Broadus mission offering. Well, this may end quicker than I thought. Our local goal was to give $10,000 to that, if you remember. And just recently, Ryan said we actually gave about $10,500 or $600. What do you do when you don't have a voice? I must have got too excited. Well, our goal was $10,000. We went over that. Our goal last year was for another mission offering. We went way over that. Let me say something about our Kentucky state-level missions offering, our Kentucky Baptist Convention that we're part of. We have the Eliza Broadus mission offering, and that was where our goal was $10,000. We have Kentucky Disaster Relief that works, that have teams in eastern Kentucky, western Kentucky, Florida during all those needs. They had at one time 60 to 70 volunteers that provided like 25,000 meals, and that's up because that information is 3 weeks old. Our Southern Baptist Seminary president, Dr. Al Mohler, has just recently led a speaking engagement in Frankfurt where he was supporting Amendment Number 2. If you're not familiar with that, I won't politic. I'll just tell you, find out what it is and know what it is, and try to stand where you think you need to stand on that. But he was up supporting the Amendment Number 2 that will be coming up next Tuesday for a vote. Is at that Frankfurt rally. The programs that we have in Kentucky, some of those are WMU, we support that. We support Clear Creek Baptist College, which is a Bible training college for pastors. We support the disaster relief. We have an Oneida Baptist School, which is a high school and elementary school for troubled children, and there have been many a life saved, young people, through that ministry in our Kentucky Baptist. We have Sunrise Children's Home that works with children with different types of issues and needs. We have Kentucky Baptist, helps in 2,300 affiliated churches that are spreading the gospel right now through all of these types of programs. Now let me talk about national just a minute. North American Mission Board, their special offering is the Annie Armstrong Easter offering. That offering, according to the information I have, has had a record high of giving at $68.9 million, and the national cooperative giving tops $200 million for the first time since 2008. And so the giving in the midst of a difficult time with COVID and people unemployed and circumstances and situations and churches closing their doors, and you'd think surely things are going to go downhill badly, and there have been some declines in some areas, but the giving throughout the cooperative program during this COVID time has not declined, but rather it has increased. And so maybe that just goes to say that when God's in charge of your money, He'll put it where He needs it. Some way, somehow, that has ended up making big gains in budgetary items. International Mission Board, we need to be really proud of that because we have a special person that is the president of our International Mission Board. Anybody know that guy's name? Who said it? I heard a rumbling someplace. First name's Paul. What would the last name be? Paul Chitwood, yes, a former pastor of First Baptist Church, Somerset, Kentucky, is the president. He is the president of our International Mission Board. And I want to tell you this because I've done it. If you want to talk to Paul Chitwood, you just call his office and tell him you're from Somerset First Baptist Church. And for me, he was on the phone before the secretary could hardly tell him who was making a call. It wasn't because he knew me. It was because he's part of our family. And we're so happy to have had him here and to see how the Lord has moved him on and used him. Paul Chitwood, president, our former pastor. The offering for the International Mission Board is the Lottie Moon Christmas offering. It's in the millions of dollars. 2022, we received a historic high of $203.7 million. All going to those 3,600 international missionaries to help them spread the gospel of Christ to the entire world. I want to finish with this. This group of international missionaries that are out there, this 3,600 that I mentioned earlier that are working, this is some of the things they have done. They have engaged 93 in 21-22. They have engaged 93 new people groups. Now, new people groups are people that haven't previously had the gospel given to them, and there are new groups that the gospel has been taken to. So there we're doing our part to try to take this gospel around the world. In 2021, there was 176,795 new believers. That's what our missionaries have done. They have won 176,795 people to the Lord. And you know what? If you have given any money to this church, it has gone to the cooperative program. It's being sent on to the International Mission Board, and you're part of that team. I think that's an exciting thing myself. When I have a down day or a sad day or a tough day or a bad day or I feel gloomy and whiny and wimpy, I can always think that I'm part of this international mission team, and irregardless what I do, if I'm just giving some money to the church, I know that I'm part of helping those missionaries spread this gospel and see that many people saved. There were also 22,744 new church plants through the International Mission Board. That means all over the world we're starting new Christian churches with pastors most of the times from their own people. And those pastors are going to schools where we're supporting seminaries that are training those pastors. And the goal of our missionaries is not to be the person that takes over in their community and pastors all the churches and tells everybody what to do. The goal of our missionaries throughout the world today is to get people from those communities and train them up and get them in the pastorate so that we can slip away and go someplace else and start a new church and they can carry on the work. And that's happening tonight through the Southern Baptist Cooperative Program throughout the entire world. What a great ministry for us to be part of. There were 107,701 baptisms. And then I'll remind you this as I get ready to close. December the 4th through the 15th. We hardly ever hear about this anymore. Surely we would have, but I'm getting to it a little early. But a lot of times it just seems like I'm not hearing the things I used to hear about our Southern Baptist Cooperative Program through our churches and through all the media and all that's going on. Now, I happen to be part of a little daily broadcast that has a lot of different news items called Kentucky Today. And so if you want to try to keep up with things, Kentucky Today will give you a lot of Kentucky Baptist work that's going on and tell you a little about what's happening, and you can get that. But you can go to sbc.com. You can put in Southern Baptist. You can put in Cooperative Program, and you can get more information about what's going on in our Southern Baptist work than my little mind can comprehend. It's overwhelming, all that's going on. We are part of this gigantic, enormous work that's going on in the world. And although we might sit here and not even realize it or know it, we're part of it. And let me tell you who knows. God knows. And those three offerings that I mentioned, the Eliza Broadus, the Annie Armstrong, the Lottie Moon Christmas offering, every penny that you put in the offering for those skips every bit of the organization and the cost of keeping the organization going, and it goes straight to missionaries who tonight, I know because I've been there with them, they sit and they pray on Wednesday nights that the Lottie Moon Christmas offering will be big enough to give them the money that they can buy tires for their Jeeps, that they can buy projectors to go out into the middle of nowhere with a generator and put up a sheet and play the Jesus film and tell people how to believe in Jesus and come to know Christ as their personal Savior. And when we get to heaven, we're going to see millions of people that have been won to Christ because people like us gave to offerings like that and provided the means and the money to be able to keep this great mission program in the Southern Baptist Convention operating throughout the world. When I close with this, as a member of the Southern Baptist Church, you're on the team, helping missionaries at home and around the world reach the world for Christ. And the Bible said what? When we reach the world for Christ, then the end will come. This is what Dr. David Jeremiah said just a couple of weeks ago. I heard him say it. He said, this is the first generation ever that has the means to accomplish this mission, to take the gospel around the world. There are others I've heard say that says that's already been done. There's nothing keeping Jesus from returning right now. So I ask this, now do you know why it's great to be part of a Southern Baptist church? Well, if you're not happy about it, I don't have to worry about you, but I want to tell you, I'm happy to be on this team. It means a lot to me to be a Southern Baptist. Not that I have anything against any other denomination or their work. I know there's great works going on. I just know our work, and I believe it's a great work, and I'm so thankful to have got to be a part of it for really my entire life. Once I learned who I was and decided that's what I wanted to be, from that point on, I've been so happy to be part of it. I know this, and I say this, we're not perfect. Well, you know what? Nobody else is either, are they? You know, Southern Baptist, we're not perfect. We're not perfect. But I believe, that's just me, I believe we are sincerely trying to do the best we can do to tell the world that Jesus saves. And I want to be part of that group. I want to be part of that group. Now, we're going to finish tonight with a little song. This is going to be our benediction. So you just listen to it. It's one of the singers that I've heard many times, and I don't know that you'll know him at all. But we're going to listen tonight to Carol Robertson sing what David often sings, Master, thou callest. And when this is over, you're dismissed. Thank you again for coming tonight.
Master, thou callest, and this